all of the early mornings and late nights,
coming home after an exhausting hunt,
putting in all the extra work, even when people aren't watching,
and just wanting to crawl into bed, but you sit down and you clear your SD cards and you organize your footage.
It's all the little things and all the things that add up to be successful.
And you pack your bag for the next morning just to lug in another 50-pound bag just at the chance.
It allows me to go out there and do what I love and show everyone that just being an average person, you can put in a little bit of extra work or a lot of extra work and you can get something out of it.
The chance of sharing a story like the stories we're about to share.
Really, you can pretty much do whatever you set your mind to as long as you grind.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Grind. First, I'd like to apologize for just the all-white background. Not as cool as the little garage studio Colin and I had set up for some previous episodes, but this is the story that, if you follow me on Instagram and stuff, you've seen the 2-year build up to this story, but this is the story of Johnny. And I mean, this is one of the hunts that every hunter dreams of, the hunts with ups and downs and heartbreak and redemption, and it truly captures just the obsession that hunters like myself and other bow hunters, the obsession we get with that one deer that just seems to outsmart us. And unfortunately, a video will never do this story justice. Only the people who lived with me, who were a part of this story for the last 2 years, will really understand what went into this and the obsession. But we're still going to do our best to bring you the story, and without further ado, the story of Johnny. So the story begins in the late summer, maybe early fall of the 2020 hunting season. I had my trail cameras out. I was getting videos and pictures of some deer, nothing great yet, and then all of a sudden this really nice 10-pointer showed up. I only got 2 blurry pictures of him and maybe a video. And you really just couldn't tell if this deer was anything special, but he was the first deer at the farm that I decided to add to the hit list. And that's really where this story begins. Fast forward to October 18th, and that's the next time I meet this deer. That's the first time I meet this deer in person. I hunted a lot that early season. Hunted a bit at school on some public land because I'm in college right now, so I don't live back in my hometown. But October 18th, I was hunting at the farm, and I was sitting in a double ladder stand that the previous property owners had left, and it's not a great stand, and I really realized that this day. A lot of the trees got bulldozed around it, which really sucks, but it kind of ruined that stand because you just get skylined as soon as a deer comes around the corner. They're able to pick out your silhouette against just the sky. There's no trees for cover, so. Anyway, I was hunting there, saw a few deer in the morning, and then it was really slow, and I started packing my stuff up. And I don't know how much of this day I have on video, but I started packing my stuff up, and I was putting the camera in the bag, or I was taking it off the camera arm or something, and all of a sudden this deer just comes sprinting around the corner. It must have gotten bumped by something because it was not moving in a natural way, but I flipped the camera on it quick, and this was Johnny. This was actually my first time meeting him, and he was on the hit list, didn't have a name for him, and that's actually the day I decided to name him. I think what happened was I was reviewing the footage, and he turned sideways at one point when he was running away. And in stride, he just looked exactly like the John Deere logo. So I just decided Johnny was going to be his name, and that's what everyone knows him as. Throughout the beginning, prior to that first time meeting Johnny, throughout the beginning of October, and then even into the end of October, in the middle of October, I just really didn't get to hunt a whole lot. I had midterms and stuff at school, and I wasn't able to come back from college a whole lot and hunt. I hunted a lot of public land here, which was kind of a cool experience, and that was really embracing the grind, hiking in and stuff, and I actually did end up seeing a giant public land deer, but never really got on anything the way I think I would have at the farm, so that was kind of unfortunate. But it was getting to be the end of October, and I knew that I just had to get home and I had to chase after this deer. Halloween weekend rolled around, and I knew I was finally going to get the opportunity to get home and hunt. I got home the 29th, and I immediately went to pull SD cards because the week prior we had a major cold front move through, and I had this feeling that this cold front had gotten all the deer on their feet. So first thing I did when I got home is I went to the farm and I pulled SD cards, and sure enough, confirmed what I thought. The main scrape that I had was obliterated. It was a giant scrape. It had tons of deer on it every night for that cold front. There were actually 3 bucks that got added to the hit list because of those trail camera photos and videos. And I had a bunch of videos of Johnny, and they truly confirmed that he was something special. He was the biggest bodied deer I'd ever seen. And I sent it to a lot of friends, and they couldn't believe the way this deer's body was built. He had a great rack too, but just the build of this deer was really what made him a special deer. Now that I was home, it was time to hunt. And as you bow hunters know, Halloween can really just be a special night in the woods. A lot of spooky things can happen, and sometimes it's where you really start to see peak rut. And actually, Halloween night was the first night that I started to see any kind of rut activity. There was a combine in the field a couple hundred yards away from me the whole night, and it was kind of spooking deer around, and it was far enough away that I was still seeing some deer movement near me, but not as much as I probably would have. And then with about 30 minutes left of legal shooting, the combine shut off. I saw the guy get out and go to his truck, and he left it there. And that's when the rut was really on. All of a sudden, deer just started coming out of the corn, coming out of the trees. There were just deer everywhere, and I could see bucks running around, and it was getting dark in a hurry. And I rattled a couple times and grunted just to see what would happen. And I ended up calling in a young buck, and then that buck ran off, saw a bunch of other deer, and all of a sudden I heard something snapping behind me in the woods. And the way this stand sets up is I oversee a cut cornfield right next to the neighbor's property. And there's a little trail behind me through the woods that the deer will sometimes take, but I'm mostly just hunting, and it's over the creek behind me. I'm mostly just hunting right in front of me. But I heard a branch snap, and I turned around, and sure enough, there was Johnny. 32 yards maybe in the trees. At the time I didn't have any kind of pole saw, so I had no lanes cut. There were just little openings I could maybe get a shot, and I quick slipped my phone out of my pocket, and I saw that it read that I had 2 minutes left of legal shooting, and I knew that the video quality was going to be terrible. I'm not even sure if I have video from that. I'm starting to think that maybe I don't, because it was so dark you couldn't see anything. But I could see him with my eyes. But he was in the woods behind me, so it was extra dark. If he was in the cut corn, I probably could have shot him, but I drew back and I held it on him. I anchored in, but I couldn't see my peep sight at all. And I thought my anchor was solid, so I think I could have made the shot without seeing my peep sight, but I couldn't see my peep sight, and I didn't feel comfortable, and this deer I knew it was something special, so I really didn't want to risk hitting it bad and never finding it and it going off and dying somewhere. So I held the draw for like 2 minutes while he stood there, and then he started to walk off, and I let down, and I let him walk away, and that was the first time he really got the best of me. Sadly, it would not be the last. Now I knew Johnny was in the area, so the next week I knew I had to get home and hunt. I believe I came home on like a Thursday, and I hunted Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and it was so hot. It was like 70 degrees during the first week of November, and the hunting was terrible. Luckily, a lot of my classes had gone online because of COVID, so I was able to skip a couple and stay back for the whole week. So I actually stayed back for the entire week, and then into the next weekend, and I might have even stayed into the next week. I think I was home for like 10 or 12 days or something. It was the most I've ever hunted, but it was really warm throughout the next weekend and into the next week, so I waited, and then all of a sudden it started to cool off. So I checked the forecast to come up with a game plan for the next day, and it said 100% chance of rain. The pressure looked really good, the temperatures were dropping, but it said it was going to be pouring rain all day. So what I actually did was I called Colin to see if he was going to be hunting. I knew he probably wouldn't be working because of the rain. His job sometimes gets canceled because of rain. So I called him. He said, I'm not going to be hunting. I can't get a camera into the tree stand and stuff. So I came up with the plan that I was going to get my box blind out, or my pop-up blind out. I was going to take it out that night and go set it up in the dark. And then me and Colin were going to go in the morning and we were going to see what happened. So that's what I did. We got all our stuff ready. We got in there early and we decided we were going to sit all day. No matter what, we were going to sit all day. And we were set up on this field all morning. And basically, we had 2 deer in front of us in the morning. But directly to the north, which was the direction we were facing, there's a fence line that separates our property and the neighbors. And all the deer were in the neighbor's field on the other side of that fence the entire morning. The deer over there couldn't hear us grunt, they couldn't hear us rattle, especially in the rain. So we knew we had to get closer if we were going to try to basically bait one off with rattling. Basically try to convince a buck to come over and come on to the decoy that we had set up. And actually at the time, the decoy that I was using was my 3D target, which by the way weighs like 200 pounds and it's hard to carry in, but I didn't have a decoy at the time, so we were using my 3D target. So about 10:30, the rain let up a little bit, there weren't deer in the field, so we decided we were going to move the blind to that fence line. So that's what we did. We went to that fence line and we sat right on the fence line next to a trail where the deer crossed the fence, and we set the decoy up so that hopefully they could see it over the fence. And then the goal was basically just to sit there and hopefully get a deer to come over. And honestly, I could fill a book with everything that happened on this day, but I'm going to try to keep it short because there's a lot more to this story. But basically, we saw deer in and out of this field all day. You wouldn't believe it. There were deer standing there when it was pouring sheets of rain for hours on end. And deer just kept coming in and out, and they'd feed, and does would feed, and then the bucks would come in and chase them around, and then the does would feed, and the bucks would come in and chase them around, and then you'd see them running up through the woods, and we saw 3 or 4 hitless bucks. And we saw Johnny at least 5 different times. He came out, went back in, came out, went back in, and we actually got some really good footage of him. And towards the end of the day, he wasn't hearing what was going on. We were rattling, and we started to think he might be deaf because other deer were hearing us, but he just wasn't hearing it. So I actually got out at the back of the blind, and I put my hands in the air, and I just started smashing the antlers together. And I started scraping the ground, and Colin's like, yeah, dude, he's picking his head up, get back in. So I get back in the blind, we get the camera on him, and we're filming him, and he comes right towards us. And then he veers off and starts heading to the west. So I grunted again, and then he comes right towards us. He gets on the fence, or he gets on the tree line, and he starts coming right at us, directly at us. And so I'm thinking, here it is. We're finally going to get the shot. He's going to come right at us, and then come to the west of us, and go over this little fence crossing. Dude, he's inside of 25 yards, 30 yards. No, 15. He's looking right at the blind. Oh my god, dude, he's going into the woods. He might circle behind us. And he came right at us and went to the east. And he circled around to where there's another fence crossing. And luckily, I think we had our wind, it wasn't super windy. I think all our scent was just sitting down there in the blind. And so I think he would have circled around, and we opened that back window, and I had a little lane where I could shoot, and Colin had a little spot he could hand film it. So we were just waiting for him to pop out this little trail. And all of a sudden, the little young buck comes running into the decoy, starts circling the decoy, and just starts blowing and blowing and blowing. And this little buck takes off running, and Johnny was lost somewhere in the woods behind us. He never came out on the trail. We never heard him run off. This was when we realized he's a really smart deer, and it's going to take a lot of work to kill him, because it just seemed like he constantly knew what was going on, and he was always on edge when he was coming in. He circled downwind to try to smell us when he came in, instead of taking the easy trail right to the decoy. And yeah, this was another wild encounter with Johnny where he really got the best of us. After that day, I knew that Johnny was in the area, I knew that he was active, and I knew I had to hunt every second that I had free time. Luckily, most of my classes were online, so I was actually able to hunt 4 or 5 days a week, and I hunted more than I ever have in my entire life. Every time I had the wind for it and the conditions for it, I was at the farm. And when I wasn't at the farm, I was hunting public land, trying to increase my odds of getting a deer killed on camera for you guys, because it had been 4 years, I think, since I had killed a deer on camera. So I was taking advantage of every opportunity I got, and I hunted harder than I ever have. The rest of November was extremely frustrating and extremely demoralizing. Like I said, I hunted harder than I ever have. I was in the stand almost every day, twice a day, sometimes all day sits, and I saw Johnny dozens of times, but it was clear that he just was not coming on our property. We don't have a lot of cover. There had been some stuff that went down where some people had bulldozed a bunch of trees on our land, and there's just some miscommunication, and it really, really hurt the hunting season. The deer just weren't on our land. They were holding tight to the neighboring properties, and I could see them, and I kept hunting just to keep an eye on him. Just the obsession. I needed to know that he was still alive and active, and I just needed to see him. So I basically knew for the whole end of November that I wasn't going to shoot him on our farm, but I just wanted to keep tabs on him, and sure enough, I saw him dozens of times. Usually it was way off to the west. There's a CRP field and an alfalfa field on the neighboring property, about a quarter mile away, and I would see him bumping does around that every morning and every afternoon, and I just kept hunting just to watch him. A few times I think I got him on camera, but most of the time I was basically just sitting there watching him through the binos, just seeing what he was doing, kind of learning a little bit about his behavior, but mostly just watching him. I even started to hunt some different properties towards the end of November, early December. I started to hunt a place in the town where my grandparents live. I hunted a little public. It just became clear that I wasn't going to be able to kill a deer on our property. Then shotgun season came and went, and all that was left was the late season. And luckily for the late season, I had no food. All the deer were staying on the neighboring properties. There were no deer on our property. And it just became pretty clear that it wasn't going to happen this year. It was extremely upsetting, because I had never put more hours into something and not come out successful. So, I mean, 2020 was really my year of learning in the hunting world. I learned so much from hunting that hard, and I learned so much from failing that many times. And I knew that next season I was going to go after this deer just as hard, because I kind of wanted to get revenge, because he really got the best of me the entire 2020 season. So then it's fast forward, and we're to summer of 2021, and the 2021 season is right around the corner. I had no food plot like I had planned, because there was some issues with just not with the farmer, but my family not wanting to step on the farmer's toes and even give me an acre to plant a food plot. But we're figuring that out. Next season it's going to happen. But this year I didn't have any food plots. We had some grass put in, which was kind of nice. Not the kind I would have planted. It really didn't grow up very tall at all, so the deer weren't living in it. But luckily it added a little bit of an opening where they could walk in between the trees, the tree line and the corn line, and they could kind of stay in between that, and at least had some cover with that grass, because it was maybe a couple feet tall. But I really didn't know what to expect. I set up 2 mock scrapes over in that grass, and for the first time I hung a stand over on that side of the farm where they had done all the bulldozing the previous year, so I hadn't even tried to hunt it. There were just no deer over there. It was really tough to find a tree to hang a stand in, because most of the good trees got bulldozed, and there was really slim pickings. But I hung a stand over one of the mock scrapes, and I had another mock scrape, and I set up my cameras, and I had done all the work. All that was left was to wait for the 2021 season. The season started really slow for me. I had a much more rigorous course schedule than I had ever had. None of my classes were online, so it was becoming pretty clear that I wasn't going to be able to hunt nearly as much as I did the previous year. So I actually ended up hunting for the first time on October 14th, which is the latest I've ever started a season. And I only hunted that one night, public land, here where I go to school, and it was horrible. It was like 85 degrees, got to maybe 78 when the sun went down, and the bugs were just eating me alive. I saw a couple does, but I just decided I was going to wait till the conditions were right, and then I was going to go home. I wasn't going to waste any more time getting eaten by mosquitoes just to see a couple little swamp does on this public land. So decided I was going to wait and just wouldn't get to hunt as much. The weekend of October 22nd, I finally made it home to hunt. Hunted one time in this stand, and then had to move the stand. That's how my season started. So like I said, I moved the tree stand that I had just set up on that one side of the farm for the first time, and I'm not even sure if I got to hunt in it yet, and the wind conditions were terrible for it. So I went back to one of my old stands that originally was an observation stand, but then all these deer started using this little area. It was kind of like a little choke point in their travel corridor. So I actually ended up starting to hunt this some mornings because I was having a lot of encounters with deer, and I was getting Johnny on trail camera in that area a lot. Usually while it was still dark, but I knew there was a chance I'd get to see him. So I was sitting over this little area that overlooks the little farm drive that comes in, and then it's just a mowed little area with a fireplace or a fire pit that my family kind of uses as a little campground area, really. It's kind of where they can go out to the farm and play beanbags, and my brother can have friends over, and they set up tents sometimes and they just camp there. It's literally like hunting on a campground. But like I said, it's kind of a little choke point where these deer travel, and it's the only opening in the little travel corridor that they take. So I set up on it, and it's the morning of October 24th. And all of a sudden, while it was pitch black, I was setting one of the cameras up, and I hear something stomp, stomp, stomp. I hear something just coming through the grass. I look to my left and I can't see anything. It's just pitch black. But then whatever this deer was, I wasn't 100% sure at the time, it moved in front of the corn, and I could just see a silhouette of this dark body. Put my binoculars up at like 25 yards just so I could see right tight into its head and see what deer it was. But I think I already knew in my heart what deer it was because it looked like a cow when I saw the silhouette. Sure enough, I got my binos on it, and it was Johnny. And just like the trail camera photos had shown, he had started to go downhill, and he was all busted up, but I knew that this was still a hitless deer. He was still like the oldest deer on the farm. He was just going to keep going downhill. The story made him a trophy on its own. He still was built like a cow, so him being broken up and having gone downhill, it really didn't bring down the trophy aspect of it for me at all. I still was going to chase Johnny. I sat for a couple more hours, and all of a sudden another buck comes through, and this one was really nice, really nice. Not a giant, but just a nice deer. And I decided right away that he was too young. But then he stood broadside at 30 yards for like 10 minutes, I think. And basically what I was doing is I was holding the bow, and I'd lift it up like I was going to draw back, and then I'd lower it down, and I'd pull the binos out, and I'd look through the binos, and I was like, oh no, he's too young. Well, maybe he's a shooter, and I'd pull up, and then I'd lower it down, and he stood there for like 10 minutes and didn't see any of this. Finally, I let him go, and he's actually this deer I call KJ now, because I ended up having a bunch more encounters with him, and he's a beautiful young buck. And I think he's going to really blow up into something special. But this was, I believe, my first close call with Johnny of this 2021 season. I had seen him at distance and on camera a few times. This was my first close call with him. And I knew that I was getting close. The following weekend, I knew I had to go home and hunt again because Johnny was in the area and I knew I was getting close to getting on him. So October 29th, I went and sat in the evening in that new stand location where I had moved the stand the previous weekend and hadn't gotten to hunt it. So it's not a good tree. Like I said, it was slim pickings, but I had that stand set up. I actually bought a pole saw and I cut some shooting lanes, and I thought for sure I was in the right spot where I was going to get a shot at something. Sure enough, that evening I rattled in a good buck, and then he got between two cornfields on a fence line that ran between the two, and he walked off and I didn't see him again. But these were the first signs of the rut for me for 2021, and I knew that this was going to be my chance to shoot this deer. That previous evening hunt was actually October 28th. The next day, October 29th, I set up in the same stand in the evening, and the rut was really on. I saw a huge buck up in the neighbor's alfalfa field like a quarter mile away, bumping some does around, and I had basically just decided that was Johnny. I don't know what kind of made him look like that. I think his body was really big. And I decided that was Johnny, and he went off that direction, so I need to focus over there. And then I rattled a couple times, and I actually got a buck that came into the corn, and there's like a little, there used to be a draw there, but it was one of the things that sadly got bulldozed. It was a nice draw of trees, a little ditch kind of. This deer entered into the corn, and I could hear his antlers ripping on corn cobs, and I thought for sure this is a shooter. So I had my bow ready. He comes out, he's just a young 8-pointer. Came in real close, it was really cool, did exactly what I was hoping these deer would do, and he walked off. And then it kind of got quiet for a while. I saw some deer up in the neighbor's field. I didn't see any deer around me, and I kind of thought the evening was coming to an end. I think there was like 10 minutes maybe of legal shooting left, but basically it was calling it quits. And then all of a sudden, I see out of the corner of my eye behind me, in the little mowed campground area, a nice buck coming. Basically, behind me, over top of the creek, I could see this little mowed area, but I really didn't have a shot unless they came right next to the creek. It would be about, I had ranged it at 35 yards. In the one area I thought they'd maybe walk, otherwise it was like a 60-yard shot to where the other spot they walk over there. But it was basically, it gave me the opportunity to at least take a shot if for some reason deer came that way. They usually didn't. Then all of a sudden I saw one, and it looked really nice, so I turned around, got the camera on it. I was looking on the little camera screen, and I realized it was KJ again. And so I decided, I was holding my bow, I was like, I don't need to worry about shooting, I'm just going to film him for a while. And keep in mind, it's the rut, so I'm thinking if there's this buck, he's either by himself searching for a doe, or he's with a doe. I didn't see a doe, so I just decided I was going to film him for a while, and I was looking through the camera, moving the camera around, looking down like this, and in the little camera screen, all of a sudden I see a huge body moving behind KJ, and I look up, and Johnny had come in right behind him, was just a couple feet behind him, following him in. I don't know what was up with that, but there he was. And I realized it was him, my heart started racing, I got the bow ready, and I put the camera on him, and he came right up next to the creek. I got the camera on him, and that's when things just started to go south. The camera was lower than my eyesight, so my eyesight showed that it was a clear shot, but the camera kept grabbing some tree branches that stuck out in the way. So the camera kept focusing and auto-focusing on Johnny and then on the tree branches, and I couldn't get it, so I don't know how I managed to get as clear a footage as I did. It's not great because it was dark, but I grabbed the camera like this. I grabbed it, flipped it into manual focus, and then just cranked on it while I looked at the little screen from like 4 feet away from it, and just tried to get it in focus as best I could because there was a little window where I could shoot him, and he had stopped right in that window. Then I quick drew back, got lowered so I wouldn't hit this one tree branch,